Welcome to another episode of Birdsong. I'm your host Kayuda, and in this episode we are drawing on the wisdom of the stars, and we're looking at anchoring that down into the here and now, astrological wisdom, embodied astrology with maybe a sprinkle or perhaps a smattering of Amazonian plant medicine. And hey, I'm certainly by no means an expert on the theme of astrology. And actually, I really don't know too much at all. So who better to lead the way than one of our previous guests? She is a mystic, she's holistic, she's a plant healer, a divine revealer. Some might say she's a wise witch incarnate, fresh from the Amazon with that wild jungle plant medicine glow. She's a star tracker, a crypto stacker, at least as far as I'm aware. It's the rose lover, Venusian stunner, Lara Charlotte.
What an intro. Hi.
Any amendments to that intro, Lara?
I just might need a copy of it, I think.
Change the biography on your website, huh?
Yeah, why not?
So, as far as I'm aware, you are in New Zealand, as you mentioned before, and as I've seen, you've been posting a few updates in regards to aspects of your blood lineage, visiting old family homes, ancestral connections, so on and so forth. And then, as many of us know, you've had your recent jungle visitations. So I'd love for you to fill us in on your recent journeys and explorations, and then we can launchpad into this greater theme of embodied astrology. How's that sound?
Awesome. Yeah, sounds good. So I've just arrived back in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I had this flight booked in January to come back on the day that I came back, and it just so happens that it lined up perfectly for me to attend the funeral of my maternal grandfather, so my mother's father.
Mm-hmm.
He was 88. He passed after living his entire life on the same farm where he was raised, and going back to that land, going back and connecting with that place, it's one of the only places I think that remains unchanged since my childhood, like somewhere I can go and everything just looks the same. And spending a few days there, supporting my mother, reconnecting with some family that I haven't seen for a long time, and also just, reflecting on what it means for this over 100-year legacy of farming on that land to be dissolving, because as far as I know, no one's taking over the farm. So that was powerful. Flying straight back in from 2.5 months in Iquitos in the northern Amazon of Peru, where I was facilitating ayahuasca and master plant retreats for Aya healing retreats. They're a great outfit. They're very trauma informed. They're very big on making sure that all the checks and balances are in place to really support people's mental health and physical health without diluting too much the traditional practice of dieta. So that was great. I've had a chance to connect with a different lineage, Shipibo lineage, working with Rao, the tree of light, which is kind of, it's received this almost cult following, and it's not the lineage I was trained in. And I had my suspicions. I was like, I don't know about this. And, I can verify after being out there and sitting with the tree and witnessing people work with the tree that the rumors are true. It's a beautiful medicine and a beautiful lineage. And it was a great time. So here I am in New Zealand now for just about 10 days. And then I'm heading to Australia to support a dear sister in her postpartum time. She's just had a baby, and her first child is my godson, whose name is Kai also.
There you go.
And I've never met him because he was born in 2020, and I just haven't gotten back to Australia since then. So Carla and Jose, really good friends, going to go and spend some time with them. And I have some other projects happening which we can touch on later. So that's me, really. That's the update. Yeah,
we'll definitely touch on those projects later. So were these themes of ancestral connection present for you when you're in the jungle, or did that kind of manifest when you landed back in New Zealand?
I think they're always present in the sense that whatever is emerging and evolving through my own individual story and life, it always somehow grows out of my origins, the good, bad, and the ugly of who I am and where I come from. And yeah, when I'm thinking about it, I mean, in the context of astrology, there's some really poignant stuff that's wrapping up for me right now and about to begin for you. That's related to this too. So yeah, I think there are some old stories that have been laid to rest in my lineage, and the way that they have been expressing through my life is also being laid to rest, and then that's giving space and energy for some new stories to evolve. And I think a big part of that is that, New Zealand was colonized by the English, and my great grandparents that were given that 100-year lease on that land by the New Zealand government, they're part of that story too. So there's something interesting around that ending. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I'm often curious to know or to ask people that have had a long relationship with plant medicine but related areas of inquiry is, and I'll ask you this, in which ways were you or are you aware of your developing relationship with this body of work? And this body of work might be just, you might want to talk about plant medicine or the intersection of plant medicine and astrology. I'm curious about the developing relationship over the years.
What started out as a quest to relieve my own personal suffering, and is hooked up to this very curious nature that I have. I'm just a curious person. I want to know why, how, what, what it's ultimately become is it's become about relationship. It's become an ever deepening, evolving, direct experience of like, what does it mean to be in relationship with everything, with my, across time and space, with my ancestors, with the people around me, with the plants, with the elements, with the stars, with what does it mean, like basically what's the meaning of life? Why am I here? What's going on? And for me, it is an intensely relational experience, even if I've had my moments of feeling total oneness and that everything is just all one big soup of consciousness. We still have to move around in this body and experience that differentiation, and that differentiation happens through relationship and the mastery of those relationships. Like how do they work? What do they have to give? What's the give and take? And really everything I do now is about those relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot of relating in different ways that's been happening over the past few years, especially since we've first had our chat on episode whatever it was on Birdsong, one of the earlier ones to be sure. And there's certainly a lot that we could talk about and that we will talk about. But as you have suggested, and this is a segue into our themes around astrology, you're currently talking and teaching a lot about this era in the context of astrological cycles and seasons. And the way that you put it, if I'm correct here, is that there's this era-defining shift of Pluto, the planet, moving from one zodiac to another or one house to another. I don't know the appropriate terminology to use, but that shift is from Pluto moving from Capricorn to Aquarius. And I'm just going to lay a little bit of context before you jump in and you riff or correct me if I'm wrong. So to the layperson or the uninitiated or astrologically unaware, and I would say that I would fall into that category to some degree, saying those words, Pluto, Capricorn, Aquarius, for some that might go in one ear and out the other, or maybe a little bit of a head tilt, or maybe the glazing of eyes, or maybe there's this superficial understanding of something to do with star signs or the zodiac or planets. But really the way that you help to contextualize this shift this astrological shift is that, well, it really made a lot of sense to me. And it certainly seems like there is a correlation of what's happening in the stars and what is unfolding here in present times. And I know that a lot of people who follow you likely have more of an in-depth reference point to a lot of these astrological energies, archetypes, elements, wisdoms, however we want to phrase it. And as I mentioned, I really want to get into that, some of that deeper stuff as we progress. But before we get into the weeds, so to speak, I'd love to try and contextualize this conversation and the entire idea of practical astrology or embodied astrology in a simple way. And I might ask what may seem like some pretty rudimentary questions here, but as I mentioned to you before, I reckon there's going to be a bunch of people listening who don't really have a solid reference point or foundation of this astrological understanding. So perhaps a way into this could be to ask the questions: what is astrology? How does it work? Why should we pay attention? Why should we care? So maybe we can just start at the basics. How do you usually answer what is astrology to someone who really doesn't know or have a reference point?
Yeah, these are all great questions, and they're important ones to revisit as well, even for me, as things are evolving. The guy that I did my initial apprenticeship with, he often says that astrology is the study of light and time.
Ooh.
And I really like that, because we have to even broaden the question and say, well, what kind of astrology? Because there's Chinese astrology, there's Mayan astrology, there's Vedic astrology, there's Western astrology, and more. And then within that, there's so many variations. So to broadly umbrella astrology, I would say it is simply the study of light and time and the relationship, there's that word again, between the movement of planetary objects and our experience here on Earth. So then it goes deeper and deeper. It goes into the relationship with elements, the relationship with seasons, the relationship with, the solstices and the equinoxes, and even the relationship that we have with gods that are connected to these stories and these myths that relate to these planetary movements. So it really opens things right up to this just encyclopedia of potential, way beyond like, well, I was born in January, so I'm Capricorn, and that means this. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, so then, is there a better question to be asking than how does astrology work?
Yeah, maybe the question would be like, why does astrology work?
Okay, yeah.
Because there's something so interesting. And I will say also that there's a wonderful podcast about astrology for skeptics that does such a better job than I could ever do. And like, we could definitely link that in the show notes if people really want to dive in. But
cool, will do.
The question, like, how does astrology work? I love this old Hermetic, sort of the basis of the Hermetic tradition, which is the Western esoteric tradition that dates back into, very, very ancient times, even perhaps as far as Egypt, that says, as above, so below, as within, so without. There's this idea or this concept that's what's happening on the outside is mirrored by what's happening on the inside, and that what's happening up there is mirrored by what's happening down here. It's very hard to contextualize how astrology could be useful if we are attached to a purely materialistic and linear view of reality. For me, it's hinging on a multidimensional experience of reality. And that's why through my work with the plants, astrology has become this more self-revealing wisdom tradition that I've been guided to engage with. Because for me, it doesn't really work if we just look at it like the moon moves here and that does this here. That experience of time and space kind of limits it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So what I'm thinking about is that there seems to be this universal blueprint here mapped out in the stars that helps us to understand ourselves and the cyclical nature of the seasons within our own lives, personally, individually, but then also on this collective level. And it's like when I think about the how, maybe how does it work? I'm thinking about like putting your details into some kind of framework or program on a computer, or you're going to someone and they're figuring this out, like you're giving your birth date, your time of birth, the location of your birth. Like this is the same for getting various astrological charts. As far as I'm aware, this is the same for ascertaining what your gene keys are, human design. It's all, are they not all working off the same reference point, the same universal blueprint of the stars?
Yeah. Yeah, and birth time, place, and location is pretty universally the core blueprint for most systems of astrology across the world.
Yeah, okay. So do we want to expand upon, and you've kind of alluded to this already, but I'd love to hear you speak more about like why should we pay attention? Why should we care?
Yeah. Why should anyone pay attention to the solstice or the equinox, or that for some reason you always get your period on the full moon or the new moon? Why should we pay attention to these rhythms that seem to somehow connect directly to us and something outside of us? From my perspective, as an animist and also probably an evolutionary astrologer, I'd say that's the main school of astrology that I'm centered in largely. If you're interested in living in relationship with the world beyond your small self, and if you're interested in the evolution of consciousness as something that's perhaps been supported by more than just your own will, then astrology can be an incredible ally for opening up to those deeper currents of change and aligning with them and participating with them, and not becoming dogmatic and saying, well, this is happening because Mercury's in retrograde and therefore I'll just throw myself responsibility out the window. Spiritual bypassing is about useful in astrology as in any other context. But there is an astrological renaissance happening on Earth. Right now there's a big renewed wave of interest. And I think it's because we're living through times of such massive change that, we need our allies. We need our ancient allies. And astrology is an ancient ally. It's a system of wisdom that, for me as someone of European heritage, most of my blood ancestry goes back to Europe. This is a wisdom tradition that has been relatively unchanged since pre-Christian times. And in terms of my own culture, I was born in New Zealand. So for me, culturally, it's actually an ancestral wisdom tradition that I can connect with, that just feels very resonant and useful. Yeah.
Are you able to speak a little bit more into how we are able to see these historical or ancestral wisdom ways and the way in which they paid attention to or perhaps revered the stars and the astrological cycles? What I'm thinking about here is, I guess, my deepening into an understanding of the ancients' relationship with astrology really comes from my inquiry, my awareness, my curiosity into Graham Hancock's work, which was about a decade ago, when he was touching upon how a lot of these these ancient megalithic sites they seem to be mapped out in accordance to this Hermetic principle of as above, so below. It's like we're looking at the pyramids of Giza, the temple sites in Cambodia, so on and so forth. It seems like these are mapped out on the Earth in accordance to what we're seeing at a specific time in the stars. So, and I'm thinking about things like the precession of the equinoxes, and I guess these are some terms that kind of made me more aware of this long line of history to astrology. Yeah, there's a question in there. I guess I'm curious to hear you speak a little bit more into that.
The audio was a little bit glitchy there for a moment, so I didn't catch 100% of what you just said, but I get the idea. You know, keeping time in a pre-digital society, it had to be done through relationship with the skies, is largely what I understand. And also because of this much deeper interdependence with nature, even just prior to the Industrial Revolution, and then all the way back for those many thousands of years, it was, for culture and society to thrive, there needed to be a deeper intimacy with these cycles, right? Cycles of weather, cycles of the seasons, and there are larger astrological cycles which for sure have pertained to great changes, great disruptions, things like eclipses, that had their own mythic meaning for those different cultures. And, I do believe that a lot of the challenges that we face now are directly correlated to being divorced from that intimacy with nature. And the skies are part of nature too. It's not just the terrestrial story of what's happening on Earth. The skies are part of that too. And so I think, to be honest, hello?
Nothing like a little bit of an audio and a video glitch. Mid-podcast episode conversation.
I know. I was thinking that I'm going to, speaking of technology, move myself to the maximum Wi-Fi spot. I mean, I was just trying to be somewhere quiet, but perhaps it'll just be better for us if I move down here.
We'll have to succumb to the family happenings of whatever's happening there, whether it's the vacuuming or the doors shutting.
Yeah, this is what I get for being a bit of a nomad. It should be okay. This is a beautiful house. It's a 120-year-old villa in the deep south of New Zealand, so at least we've got a cool background.
Well, you actually said Wi-Fi instead of Wi-Fi, and I think that's appropriate. If you're sitting right next to the router, there will be a little bit of Wi-Fiing going on. Hopefully not too much.
It does happen. We'll get a bit more light. Okay, so, here I am.
All right. All good? Okay, so yeah. I missed a lot of what you were saying there, but essentially what I was getting at is there are many ways in which we can see this ancient relationship to the stars, and one of the ways in which I'm familiar with them is through these megalithic sites on Earth in accordance to the Hermetic principles. As above, so below, as within, so without. So these places, whether it's the pyramids of Giza, the temple sites in Cambodia, Easter Island, so on and so forth. There are many places scattered all across this planet that have a reference point to astrological cycles, shifts, seasons. They're almost like they're paying homage or marking a particular time and bringing that down and anchoring it onto Earth. And the question that I was asking you or inviting you to speak more into is how we see these ancestral lineages, the ancient ones, their relationship with the astrological shifts and cycles and seasons. Like, obviously, as I said, they're in megalithic sites, they're in mythologies, ancient scriptures, texts, so on and so forth. So just an invitation to speak about your observations, experiences here.
Yeah. I really do like direct experience as the ultimate, the ultimate teacher. And from a practical level, I was saying, these ancient cultures really lived with so much more intimacy with nature. And from just a practical level, in terms of farming and producing food and dealing with weather events, keeping time in a pre-digital culture, you couldn't just whip up your astrology app and just double check what day it is and when the equinox would be due. There were other forms of timekeeping. And I think on the most simple level, that's how it works. But as I said, with a multidimensional experience of reality in an animist culture, and a culture that experiences nature to be alive, to be a person, that the stars are people too. And whether they are gods, whether they are ancestors, whether they are demons coming to wreak havoc, those relationships with the movements of the sky, in my experience, and the deeper I go with astrology, I am having a very real living relationship with those planetary frequencies, with the particular intelligence that they transmit, and that in their cycle with the sun, because we're all moving around the same sun, the sun that gives light, the sun that the plants eat, that turns into food and oxygen that we breathe, there's actually a physical intimacy that's happening. And it's not just happening with the sun and the earth, it's happening with all of the planetary bodies and the stars and the moon. And so the deeper you go in these relationships, and I believe those ancestral cultures had these deep, intimate relationships because they needed to in order to survive, there's an allyship. There's an understanding of how to work together to keep everything going,
Yeah, what I'm thinking about is this direct relationship, experiential understanding or experiential knowing, gnosis, and how there is this link with that and the phrase that you use, or I've heard you use, which is embodied astrology. And I like this idea where if you want to learn more about the rain, the best time to learn about the rain, it's probably going to be in what we call winter or early spring, at least up here in the high country. It's probably not the best time to get a direct experiential embodied understanding of learning about the rain in the middle of a hot, dry summer. So the link here is what I'm thinking that the link that I'm thinking is that to learn about these astrological events and shifts in cycles, it makes sense to learn about what is happening right now, right here in the present moment. So that kind of links us into this idea of embodied astrology, but also we can probably start making a few definitions or taking a little bit of a look at this astrological shift of Pluto moving from Capricorn into Aquarius.
Yeah, absolutely. Paying attention to how you feel on a full moon, it's that simple. Yep. How you feel on a new moon, it's that simple. Women's bodies are really great at giving us a pretty direct experience of that. So to contextualize it, I practice Western astrology and I work with the tropical zodiac. And what that means is that the zodiac is pinned to solstice and the equinox, and the zodiac signs that we are relating to are pinned to those points. Now, because of the precession of the equinox over time and some other astronomical details that I don't need to go into right now because we're trying to keep this really entry level, what that means is that actually where the sun is in the sky right now today may not be exactly the astrological sign. Like we're saying it's Cancer season. The sun might still be closer to the constellation of Gemini. But this is a system that's been used for many thousands of years, and through direct experience, through noticing what happens as planets change signs and things happen, it's a system that's working, and it's working for the intended purpose of supporting the evolution of consciousness and a deeper relationship with nature. That's the intention. So just putting it out there to everyone who is a little bit more familiar, we're talking tropical zodiac, Western astrology. That's the place that I'm coming from.
Okay, just to expand upon my understanding here, and the way that I'm seeing or imaging this at the moment is we've got all these different types of astrology: Western, Chinese, Vedic. I don't know how many others there are. Oh, are you still there? Oh, yes. Hello. There you are.
Yep.
Yeah, so different types of astrology. So these are different maps, which are like I'm imaging, picturing a ball here. It's like maps that are giving like a slightly different perspective or view on something that's universally happening. Have you got a better image, a visual for how to see it?
Yeah. So basically, it's just the way that the sky is divided up differs in different traditions. The way that the map is laid upon the heavens from the perspective of the way the sun moves or the perspective of the way the earth moves, there are differences in each tradition. But the 12 sign zodiac that most people are familiar with is the one that I'm talking about. And it's, as I say, it's pinned to the solstices and the equinoxes in that way.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That makes sense. Yeah, I've seen things getting around on the internet over the years about like this forgotten house, like there's 13 houses or 13 zodiacs and like all these little, whether they're subtle or perhaps grandiose differences. And as I mentioned, without a reference point, they kind of just go over my head to some degree. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting.
I mean, that's, there's a lot of academic debate and different things. I don't find it useful. I'm like, what is the goal of this language? It's like arguing about, oh, well, if you give someone this herbal medicine, you should give them this dose, or you should harvest it this way, you should do it that way. The question is, what is the goal and does it work? And there's many different ways to slice the pie.
Yep.
The question is, what is the goal and is it working? So in my experience so far, the system that I'm using, it works for that goal.
Yeah, I think to use the language you used, or similarly, you said it essentially to catalyze this growth or evolution in human consciousness.
Yeah, and deepen and widen our relationship with nature across time, across space, to feel more deeply connected to these movements and changes that are happening beyond the small self. It always for me is anchored in this very animistic thing. And I do have, sometimes I won't check the charts for a few days, or I'll lose track of what's going on, and I'll wake up and I'll just have a visceral feeling in my body, a certain atmosphere, a certain quality of the day, certain things within myself that I recognize, and I'm going, damn, it's a Scorpio moon. I can feel it. And I'll go and check, and sure enough, so it's about becoming attuned to these rhythms of energy and consciousness that are moving in somewhat predictable ways, but we're all going to have a different experience of it based on who we are and what we're available for at any moment.
Okay, so each planet evidently has qualities, and then what's the better language to use? Should I call them zodiacs or houses? What do you call them?
Yeah, so the 12 sign zodiac, starting with Aries, moving all the way through to Pisces, are 12 constellations in the sky. And each of those constellations is a zodiac sign. When we look at an astrology chart, it's a circle, and it's divided into 12 slices, like 12 slices of a pie. Depending which system you use, those slices, hold on, let me rephrase this. Each of those slices of the pie is a house, from 1 all the way through to 12 houses. And depending on which constellation was rising over the horizon at the moment that the chart was cast, that will determine which zodiac sign is located in the first house, and then it'll go around in the order of the zodiac all the way around to the 12th. So if we had cast a chart at the moment when Aries, the traditional first sign of the zodiac, was just rising over the horizon, the first house would be in Aries, and the second house would be in Taurus, and so on. But if we cast the chart at a moment when Capricorn was rising over the horizon, Capricorn would be in the first house, and then Aquarius, and then Pisces, and then so on, because there's a consistent order. What is important to understand when you look at an astrology chart is there are sort of a few different factors making up the language. The sign, the zodiac sign, that has its qualities, the houses, which are to do with the areas of life that are being activated. So the first house, this is the body, the external appearance, the identity, the kind of when you meet someone, you kind of meet the ascendant. That's the first thing you meet. That's up front and center. The second house has more to do with self-esteem, with personal resources, like the cash that you own, and so on around the chart. And then within that context of houses and signs, the planets have their positions. And then the planets perform specific functions and have specific qualities as well. So when you're weaving that all together, you're looking at this very nuanced conversation of energy that's playing out. And it's a snapshot of light and time, boom, in any given moment.
Love it. Okay. Yep. So I've wrapped my head around this. So each planet has qualities, each zodiac has qualities, each house is speaking to a particular aspect of life. And what we're looking at is the intersections and the relationships between them all.
Great.
Exactly. Easy. Okay. So Pluto, Capricorn, Aquarius. Let's speak about this. What's going on?
So Pluto was discovered in 1930. That was a time on Earth when the nuclear Cold War, like nuclear fission, there was a whole lot of interesting stuff happening. But Pluto takes around 250 years to do a complete orbit of the zodiac and to come back to its original point. So we on Earth have not, since Pluto was discovered, we have not witnessed a full cycle of Pluto. We haven't seen it come back to where it was when it was discovered yet. So, everything to do with Pluto is, in some ways, us going into territory where we do not know ourselves yet. Pluto is related to the god of the underworld, Hades, Pluto. There's a real sense from observation of what time we have had with Pluto that it catalyzes intense transformation, that it brings to the surface that which has been hidden, that which is corrupted, that which needs to be purged out through some form of revealing of toxicity in order to be destroyed and to regenerate in a new form. So Pluto, its planetary impact, let's say, for me, is so similar to ayahuasca. Within there's astroherbalism, there's, astrology has a huge role in ancient medical systems. There are quotes that say, he who is not an astrologer is not a doctor at all.
Astroherbalism, yeah.
A whole nother subject.
Yep. I can see that that's a whole other subject right there. And I guess, just to riff on that for a second, the idea of astrology and then astroherbalism, I'm guessing you could have an astro-whatever-ism for so many aspects of life. I mean, really, that is part of gaining this holistic kind of understanding of the cycles of life and the seasonal shifts and health and wellness and the cycles of evolution, all the rest of it.
Yeah, as above, so below, as within, so without. They say plants are small planets and planets are big plants. That is one whole rabbit hole that you can go down. And as someone who's worked with ayahuasca for, coming up to 9 years now, pretty consistently, hands down, ayahuasca's planetary signature is Pluto. Without a doubt. The vine of the dead, the lord of the underworld. There's a whole lot going on there. Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008. What happened in 2008? Well, the big news was the global financial crisis. That is interesting because Capricorn has a lot to do with the institutions of hierarchy, law, governance, and the physical reality of our world that is built and maintained by tradition and patriarchy and these kind of big power structures. So the banking system is, and the old boys club of the banking system that exists on Earth at this time, when Pluto came in, it was like, boom, I'm going to expose the corruption. Boom, things that are unstable and built on shady tactics are going to start collapsing. And as Pluto, since 2008, for 15 years, has been working its way through Capricorn, there has been a slow dismantling of the established order of things. Now, with Pluto getting quite towards the end of that journey, what started in 2008 is being greatly amplified, where we are seeing, massive institutional collapse, politically, economically, environmentally. We're seeing a peak moment of this toxicity being exposed and being dismantled. And Pluto has a lot to do with power, our relationship to power. Is it power in or is it power over? And anywhere where the sort of dominator culture, power over, hierarchical systems of dominance, they're being amplified and growing and sort of revealed, but also the intensity of which they're trying to hang on for dear life is also increasing. As an astrologer, it's incredible to watch the way that exact transits, relationships with other planets, like right down to the day. It's like over and over and over. I just keep seeing it. And it's so clear that with Pluto's transition from Capricorn into Aquarius, there's an entirely new evolutionary invitation on Earth. And it ain't pretty. It ain't just, yay, you just get to expand and grow. It's an ayahuasca ceremony for a new area of consciousness. And that is the Aquarian principle, is where the focus is shifting to.
Yeah, there's a little bit that I'm thinking about here. So what seems evident to me are these particular qualities that are happening up above, written in the stars, and how they're manifesting in the here and now, the tangible, the physical, the material. And maybe this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's like my brain can't let this go. And it's not even really relevant to the how is it working for us in regards to our relationship to nature, or perhaps it does in that sense, but maybe the evolution of human consciousness. But what I'm thinking about is, one, when we say a planet is entering Capricorn, like what does that actually mean? Like I'm trying to grab like a little slice. I'm thinking about the second hand of a clock going tick. Okay, now it's entered Capricorn. Or rather, is there kind of like, what does that look like? And also I'm thinking about the qualities as well. How did this? It's an interesting question to try and language, because in one sense I already know the answer, but I'll just phrase it like this and then I'll riff on that. How did the qualities come to be? Okay, well the qualities are they're part of the universal blueprint, And it seems like the qualities, they came to be through observing the shifts, the seasons of nature. Because let's just say I feel like on the superficial level of myself being a Scorpio or a heavily Scorpionic person, when I look at the qualities, or at least the qualities of what the internet sites or someone else tells me, it's like, okay, yeah, that's pretty spot on. That manifests in that way. So that's the observation of how someone shows up, or their particular qualities, characteristics, personality traits within this astrological pie, slice of the pie. So it's like through observation, then we get the qualities. But it's just interesting to think about how these qualities were observed and how this greater structure of astrological wisdom came to be, however many tens of thousands of years ago. So a couple, rather than questions, invitations, I guess, to speak about this entering of Capricorn and then the qualities.
So Capricorn as a sign, as a constellation, actually is symbolized by the mergoat. It's a goat with a fish's tail. That's what this constellation is conceived as. And I believe that some of the earliest interpretations of Capricorn go back to Mesopotamia. The Babylonians had, and the Sumerians had, phenomenal astrological schools, and tons of wisdom was lost. You know, the Library of Alexandria that I believe burnt. You know, there are incredible traditions that stretch way back, and yeah, it was done through observation, also through direct shamanic communion. You know, priests and priestesses who would have been having direct relationships with these constellations. And you know, modern Western astrology looks at things like, okay, so what's interesting about Scorpio, the constellation of the Scorpion, which is one of the easiest constellations to spot. It's just very like obvious and clear, and it has that bright red star that you can spot. Well, when Scorpio starts appearing in, because it's all based off the northern hemisphere, which is also kind of tricky being southern hemisphere people.
Yeah, that was
But
another
it's
question
about,
that I was going to ask, the reference point and the shifts.
yeah. Well, this idea of Scorpio taking us into the dark and the depths and the underworld and these kind of Scorpionic, you know, sex, death, power, money, transformation, all these Scorpio themes. Well, that's around the time of autumn, when the leaves are falling and we're heading towards winter, and then this constellation appears in the sky, and well, that's the vibe, you know. I mean, it's really that simple on the most simple level. What's so curious to me is like how I'm born in the southern hemisphere under the sign of Capricorn, but yet all of the qualities of Capricorn being the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, yet I was born close to the summer solstice down here, but yet somehow it still translates and it still works. I mean, road testing it is the only way to know, through observation and through case studies. And so, okay, let's talk about Pluto moving into Aquarius. Well, since Pluto was discovered in 1930, Pluto has not been in Aquarius. It has not entered that division of the zodiac where, you know, okay, Pluto's now in the part of the sky that we call Aquarius.
We've got the pie chart going, and that Pluto planet like almost ticks over. I'm guessing there's got to be a leeway there somewhere, depending on which kind of astrological system you're working off. But it's more like transition, right?
Yeah, and some
transitioning into
Pluto is such a slow-moving planet that we are absolutely going through a liminal mutation from one sign to the next. Something like the moon that moves quite quickly, it really can be like tick, and you feel it change. This can only be known through observation. What I will say is that in the 1700s, the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius, we had the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, and what is more Aquarian than revolution? The Aquarian theme is all about people power, the community, the right of individuals to have freedom to express themselves as they please, but for the good of all, and technological developments. And so we can see the really clear correlation between what was happening on the planet the last time Pluto was in Aquarius and what's emerging as the core themes of our collective development now. There's a very clear correlation. And so looking back at time and mapping these patterns is the way that astrology becomes self-evident, you know, in the smaller cycles of our own lives and in the greater cycles across time. Pluto's role in revealing where our relationship with power is off is extremely potent in both the collective and in the personal. You know, people who are experiencing a Pluto transit, if you've got anything in late Capricorn or early Aquarius or parts of your chart that are making aspects, Pluto's movements can be very deeply felt. And of course, you need to know your chart and you need to work with an astrologer to understand that. But in my own case, I've been having a really up close and personal experience of that because my own sun and Venus, here comes the dog, are in late Capricorn. And so I've had Pluto moving on and off my sun because Pluto moved into Aquarius for a little while. And we had ChatGPT, we had huge riots, we had stuff going on in France where they were deciding to buy oil, not using USD and breaking this global agreement around the currency that's used to buy oil. A whole lot of stuff that was just like, whoa, here comes Pluto in Aquarius. And then Pluto's gone into retrograde and moved back into Capricorn for a little while. And then we're seeing, okay, we're moving back to what? We're moving back to American politics. We're moving back to Trump getting indicted. We're moving back to these other themes that was sort of the final, all of those banks that collapsed. You know, all of those banks collapsed within days of these movements. And it's just so clear when you start piecing things together that there's an evolutionary shift that's happening. And a lot of it requires the breakdown of pre-existing structures which have outworn their evolutionary role, that are not serving the empowerment of the collective, because that is what Aquarius is about. Now, like anything, there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum of maturity. There's a spectrum of evolution. Low Aquarius. Let's talk about immature Aquarius. Low Aquarius is like groupthink, surveillance. It's only fair if everyone has to do everything the same way, and we're going to have like robocops policing everybody, and we're going to use all of the AI to kind of create this very
it's like a tech dystopia, right?
Tech dystopia is the exact term. And so people are freaking out. Here comes Pluto bringing up the fear. Here comes Pluto showing us where we are or aren't ready to deal with these new technologies. And then as we progress through things, we're given an opportunity. We're given an opportunity to take it in which direction it's going to go. Now, decentralization is super interesting. It's super interesting because Pluto in Capricorn, global financial crisis, the banking system, the hierarchies of power, these predatory banking systems that aren't fair, that maintain, you know, global hierarchies of power that really disadvantage certain countries and groups of people and individuals, prioritize the reckless freedom of an elite few at the top. And that's all just getting ripped open and exposed. And one of the biggest agitators is, of course, decentralized currency and cryptocurrency. How interesting that the astrology chart for the first Bitcoin that was ever mined places The North Node, which is a point about evolutionary emergence and karmic direction and growth, the North Node of the first ever Bitcoin that was mined is in Aquarius. It's like, where are we going? Now, I'm not saying it's going to be Bitcoin, even though I am quite a fan. What I'm saying is that what Bitcoin represents is relevant and important to the potential of what this Pluto and Aquarius era, which will last for 20 years from next November, can do. Because groups of people that have been marginalized, that have been disempowered, that have been, suffering under the shadows of Capricorn are going, enough. And so we do have these revolutionary times. We do have these tech, like a total explosion of tech that I think many people don't quite realize the true potential of what's coming with Web3, with blockchain, with AI. Like, there's no stopping it. And so Pluto's entrance into Aquarius is the purifying and transformative force that drives the evolutionary current on the planet and in all of our lives as we face these changes.
Yeah, I love the way you speak about it. Okay, couple of questions. This retrograde, Pluto retrograde, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to be more Pluto retrogrades within this 20-year cycle of Aquarius?
There will be, but they won't take Pluto out of the sign of Aquarius. So right now we've got Pluto retrograding back into Capricorn, and then on January 20th, 2024, Pluto will re-enter Aquarius.
Okay.
The day after my birthday. So it'll be interesting to watch. Note the space. January 20th, 2024, Pluto's back in Aquarius. How does the conversation shift? Where do we see some of the stories that picked up during the brief period of time that Pluto was in Aquarius this year? Where do they pick back up and keep developing? That's the kind of observation where astrology really starts to become alive.
Whoa, okay, so like ebbs and flows. It's just not like a straight
100%.
transition into this new era, but there's going to be peaks and valleys as we make that transition into a new era or new realm, new way of being, consciousness.
And opportunities to choose how we want to relate to these times. None of this is useful if it doesn't creatively empower us to have some kind of participatory relationship with what's going on. I'm not into some dogmatic thing where it's like, well, this is happening, so that's what's happening. Like I said, I've got Pluto moving on and off my sun. So it's just like I can really feel it. There's been a whole lot of health stuff happen. All my hair fell out and now it's growing back. Is there a clearer example of loss and regeneration than all your hair falling out, and my Sun and my Venus are both there at late Capricorn. So, my appearance, my experience of beauty, my vitality, it's been very clear. And what's been happening is I've been feeling it's like the fear, during the pandemic, the way that people's fear was just brought right up to the surface. Whatever that fear was about, fear of not being in control one way or another. And the invitation in those experiences is to either keep kicking and screaming and feeling disempowered and only looking outside of ourselves and to our external circumstances for the sense that we are in control and we are getting what we need and we don't need to be scared, or being forced into some kind of evolutionary process by which we get a deeper understanding of what freedom and self-sovereignty really is. Now, it's up to the individual whether or not they want to take on that journey. But that's the kind of astrology that I'm interested in. largely. I'm not a great mundane astrologer. I'm not great at following the news and the exact time. What I'm interested in is how, as the world changes, does the planets moving through us as they move through the whole world that we're part of give us opportunities to alchemize our relationship to it all and position ourselves more creatively? Because Pluto moving into Aquarius is it's like quantum leaps into the potential for freedom, for solving a whole lot of problems, for decentralized economy that takes us out of this really predatory dominator culture, kind of exploitative, extractive thing that we're in, and moving into something that's way more humanitarian, way more altruistic, way more empowered for all of us. But all of that is going to depend on the state of consciousness of all the many, many individuals that make up the whole. So this is an interesting piece, and this is why I work with astrology in the way I do, which is trying to bring things down to a few key frequencies and using that as a platform for people to dive in to their own wisdom, intelligence, and their body, using it as a catalyzing force for self-realization.
Exciting times. The time is ripe. And the choice is there if indeed we do heed that call. Yeah, so to sum it up, and I think you put it really well in your email to me when we were discussing themes to talk to, the way that you had it is that this shift of Pluto moving into Aquarius, it's relevant regarding, as you mentioned, the collapse of the current global economic system. It's the rise of the digital currencies, decentralizations, cryptocurrencies, the AI, the biotech, all of these big political shifts that are happening. And as we're making this transition and as there's this retrograde that is happening, there's this tech dystopia that we're going to be seeing, the polarized groupthink vibe, and we're going to be ebbing and flowing into this. And the direction, the choice is certainly, the opportunity is there to move into what you called the high Aquarian ideals, and that's community, genius, individual genius, but also I guess collective genius as well, the creative problem solving, collaboration, cooperation, innovation, altruism. That's the opportunity if we do dare indeed take it on.
That's it. And Elon Musk, he's got real big Aquarian signatures in his charts and in his chart. And I don't
Musk
hate
Rat.
him, to be honest. He's a bit of a weird, like, supervillain / weird genius. And what I see with someone like Elon Musk, what I see that maybe is missing is the heart, is the consciousness being centered in the heart, not the mind. Because Aquarius is fixed air. Its element is air, and its modality is fixed. So it can become very like fixed in ideology, very fixed in concepts, and not so rooted in the heart, not so much of the consciousness in that huge magnetic force field that is the wisdom intelligence of the heart. And what I find to be so beautiful, so elegant, and this is, the deeper you go with astrology, the more it reveals this, is that the opposite zodiac sign to Aquarius is Leo. And Leo rules the heart and is governed by the sun and is all about being connected into the creative impulse of the heart and what we love. And it really warms up that cold Aquarian territory. So this is interesting to me too. It's like, okay, if we're moving into the Aquarian, people talk about the age of Aquarius. It's been talked about for a long time. And if we're moving into that, which we are in many incremental waves that are layering upon each other. But, by 2026, let's say, when I think there's a Uranus, 2026, Uranus, the planet of revolution, will move into Gemini, another air sign, and it will trine, it will make a supportive aspect with Pluto and Aquarius. By 2026, when we've got that that going on, we're going to be fully in this new era. And when we're in that era and people are like, kids are on virtual reality headsets, and maybe there's central bank digital currencies that have been issued by the governments, and surveillance is through the roof, and AI is doing everything, and people are freaking out. If they are, where is the answer? Where is the balance? Where is the medicine to counteract that and to bring us back into wholeness? It's Leo. It's the heart. It's the human intelligence that can never be replaced by the mind or by technology. And that's why at the moment I'm spending a lot of time working with the Leo principle and guiding people through some of the activity that's happening in that part of the sky, because I think it's very important medicine for these times.
Yeah, that's in your heart alchemy program. We'll touch on that in a bit, but I've got a question for you, or rather a reflection. So this way of relating to the astrological shifts, it's not just looking at what's what cycle we are in now in regards to, let's just say, Pluto moving into Aquarius, but it's equally as important to look at the harmonizing principle of that, which is the Leo aspect in Aquarius. So no matter where we are, in what era or stage we're going through, there's always going to be different, like a multi-dimensional picture evolving and way of relating to bring this greater sense of balance and harmony into what could be one particular element, say the air element, being hyperactive.
Yeah, and that's exactly how medical astrology works a lot of the time too, you know.
Okay.
Astrological magic work, it's like herbalism. It's like, let's say, Ayurveda, you've got too much of one thing. Sometimes you use the opposite thing to balance it, or sometimes you use more of that same thing to regulate it and stabilize it. In this way, everything starts to open up and it becomes a wisdom. It's a medicine, you know, it's a wisdom tradition. And when I say evolutionary astrology is the school that I'm most closely aligned with, not thick and thin, because I've got my own views on a few things, but it's like, yeah, it's like there's this intelligent cosmic dance that is constantly happening, that is consciousness experiencing itself and expanding and growing. And astrology is one of the doorways in to help us participate with that more consciously.
Yeah, I was going to ask, and it makes sense, but I'll ask it because I think there's another question that's kind of building upon this one. Is that why do we care about, or why is Pluto more relevant at the moment than any other planet doing its thing, like shifting? And you've elucidated that it's this 250-year cycle, and we haven't seen Pluto move or do a full cycle or move into Aquarius before, so that's why it's relevant. And then I was thinking about, you said this stage is going to last for 20 years, right? Or thereabouts. So then what I'm thinking about in terms of this, what we may know as indigenous wisdom principles of the 7 generations, so looking even further into the future, is it necessary to elucidate what's going to be happening when Pluto moves out of Aquarius into the next stage, or are there going to be different astrological shifts with different planets moving into different zodiacs and houses that are more relevant to look at? I mean, it seems like it just gets so hyper-dimensional and so multi-layered. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. 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 Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, it really seems like, well, we can get this narrative arc of what's happening on a collective level, astrologically, but to really understand it on a deep and intimate personal level, you one either has to, and maybe it's not either or, but maybe it's both. It is learning the study, the art, the alchemy of astrology, and then also having an astrological mentor or getting readings done, whether it's one-off readings or cyclical readings as the seasons shift, to really grab, to gain more of a conceptual idea of where we ourselves fit into this collective arc, but then also so then we have more of a reference point if we aren't going to study it for ourselves, that is, then we have that reference point to gain more of an experiential understanding, experiential knowing from direct experience, from direct observation of where we're at.
Big time. I mean, who wants to be told the nature of reality? No one. Go out and figure it
Mm-hmm.
out for yourself, you know? It's like so when someone says to me, oh, well, you had a dream about a wolf and this is what a wolf means and blah, blah. I'm like, mate, I'll tell you what a wolf means to me in my own terms. You know, it's the same.
Totally.
It's,
Totally.
although there might be guiding principles and wise elders and track records and
Mm-hmm.
case studies we can look at, um, yeah, relationship has to be organic for sure.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but it certainly helps to have a human mentor help guide the way if one doesn't have that basic foundational knowledge or isn't. Not that it may not necessarily be interested, but we've all got our different paths to take and different areas of inquiry, and astrological wisdom may not be one of them which we delve into on such a deep level. So that's where meisters such as yourself come in handy.
Yeah, a big
a,
nerd,
a big nerd.
and I didn't go, oh, I'm going to study astrology. I was working with plants. I was sitting in the jungle and I just kept having dreams about planets. I kept having visions with it was all the planets. It was this light and it was Venus and it was moving through my body in a certain way and it was showing,
Mm-hmm.
it was a transmission. It was a transmission based self arising initiation that just erupted out of my being with the help of the plants. And I followed the breadcrumb trail piece by piece that led me to
Mm-hmm.
where I am now. And so I think it's important that people are always given the space to, explore their own unique inner myth. Like, what is the inner myth that you're living? Because there are gods and there are stories and there are universal archetypes and blueprints that each of us are living in our own different way. The fact that, as we just discovered, you've got this really scorpionic chart means that there could, even if you don't dive into astrology really deeply, there could be so much support and nourishment available from just spending some time understanding the scorpionic
Mm-hmm.
principle more deeply.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you've already touched on this to varying degrees, but let's get a little bit let's round it out a little bit more. So taking astrology into the body, embodied astrology. So I'm curious about this intersection between astrology and your experience with other somatic or body-centered practices, right? And we could be talking about yoga, meditation, or more intense practices which involve the transpersonal, the psychosomatic, which is the shamanic energy work, plant medicine. I'd love to hear you speak about this relationship, this connection that you're seeing, that you're experiencing.
Yeah, this is for me the front line. This is the growth edge of just what I'm really pumped on at the moment. Working, okay, it could be as simple as going out under the full moon and looking at that full moon with your eyes open and allowing that light to soak into your body and becoming observant of what you notice and what you feel in your body. How does your body, what parts of your body activate? What lights up? What sensations? Is there an opening? Is there a warmth? Is there a contraction? Are there waves of emotion arising? As you literally bathe in the light of that moon and open your body to some kind of communion with that planetary body.
I'm feeling things inside me as you're saying that. I don't know what it is, what language to place on it, but it almost feels like there's what is it? It's a yearning. It's a more of a longing for that, to create more spaciousness within my own life, to have more of that direct experiential connection through the spaciousness, through the stillness, through the silence, through giving myself the space time to go out there and do these things. The busyness of life, the full
Yeah.
multidimensionality of parenting and family and relationships and yard work, projects. Man, how much that penetrates and percolates and permeates this modern existence, the challenges and complexities of life that we're all prone to, that really can be a spanner in the works, if you will, of giving ourselves more of these moments to really connect, to really tune in on a much more deeper, much more intimate connection with nature, with the elements.
Without a doubt. And, this conversation we've been having is pretty cerebral. It's been talking, connecting through the intellect a lot. So, even just as I describe that, just describing an experience of embodied communion with the moon, just talking about it created a felt response inside your being, a longing. And that's where the astrology gets interesting to me, to look up. Venus right now is at almost maximum brightness as an evening star. She's a jewel. She's so, so bright in the western sky just after dark. And when we weave together things like what sign she's in, what phase she's in, knowing about some of those deeper invitations that her medicine in this moment can bring us, but then we actually go out and look and we receive. Or if we can't see them in the sky, we enter through meditation. Perhaps we generate a more expansive and receptive state through breath work, or through chanting, or through devotion and ritual, which is something that I really love and do a lot of. And then we drop out of the mind and we shift into the body's wisdom, and we become receptive to the actual transformative impact that relating in that way with these planetary gods, which is how I experience them, can really happen. Saturn. Everyone goes through their Saturn return at 27 to 30. It's when all those rock stars die, the 27 club. They never make it through their Saturn return. Because Saturn is boundaries. He's Chronos. He's grandfather time. He's the limits. He's the hard reality check, like grow up or get out, basically. And for me, being a very Saturn dominant person, I really feel when I tune into Saturn, I feel my bone marrow. I feel the part in my body where my bones meet my flesh, and the scaffolding of my being. And the way that my relationship to all the principles of Saturn and what Saturn is doing in the sky, but also in my body, I can more deeply work with that and more deeply leverage that in a way when I can feel it directly. And the information that I get in and through my body when I commune ritually with the planets is as useful and powerful as the work I do with psychedelic plants. 100%. And sometimes a little easier to integrate.
What are some other suggestions that you make to people who come to you that you're guiding to deepen this connection when it comes to practical ways to integrate astrology into our lives, to integrate ourselves into astrological wisdom, perhaps, maybe a bit of both? So, I mean, the obvious one that you mentioned is spend time with the moon. One example. And then I'm thinking about integrating like the back up in the mind again with the felt sense body to notice patterns forming. So it would make sense to me to have a journal or to write what it is that we're experiencing down so that we can look back on this arc that has formed as we've developed our relationship.
Yeah, keeping a journal, even a moon. The moon's a really good like gateway planet. You know, the moon is a really good place to start. I think that, yeah, you know, here's one. All of the planets have their day of the week. Tuesday, Mars's day, which is martes in Spanish. Friday is Venus's day. Doing Venusian things on a Friday, using that day to do a little bit of self-care or do something that honors beauty or do a little ritual with some money. I mean, this is just like real basic astrological attunement, and then just notice what happens. I genuinely believe that the old gods want to hear from us. You know?
Oh, yeah, I get it. Yeah. Yeah, Martin
Yeah.
Shaw. I don't know if you tune into him much, but he speaks a lot about this. Not necessarily in regards to the astrological cycles,
They're
but the
willing.
old gods waiting patiently.
Yeah, he's wonderful. I followed him for a few years, and there's also this great, if anyone's going through their Saturn return, so roughly 27 to 30 years old, and then it happens again another, you know, cycle later. There's this book called The Greatness of Saturn, which is an Ayurvedic medicinal myth, I guess you could say, or a Vedic myth about Shani, who was Saturn. And reading that book, attuning yourself to the wisdom of Saturn, it's like if you're going for a surf, you know, and the tide's moving one way and you try and just like paddle the total other way. What if you just actually stopped and were like, oh, the tide's doing this, I'll jump in over there and I'll go like that. Next thing, you're collaborating, you're communing, things are opening up, things are, you know, don't we all want things to be a little easier? I mean, some people don't actually, but you know, it's about connecting with your allies, I think, and just, you know, getting on board with the weather, basically.
I'm being mindful of our time here, but there's a couple of other things I want to get into. I've got this invitation for you. This is what's coming to my mind right now. This link, this relationship, this connection between doing plant medicine work or shamanic energy work, becoming more aware of the astrological cycles, and then also becoming more aware of the synchronicities that play out in our lives. So can you speak to this? I mean, it's something that I've noticed for sure in my life. Would love to hear you offer some direct personal experiences and wisdoms in this regard.
I have a couple of phenomenal mentors, astrological mentors, who, if I think too much about how epic they are, I start to get imposter syndrome. But, you know, they're older than me and have more experience. But one of the things that one of my mentors was talking about was about being woven back in been woven back into life, been woven back into the tapestry. And that happens when we become more available for these relationships through the body, through the heart. The mind is there as a translating device. Thank you, Mercury. But the mind is not the place where the alchemy happens, where we become woven back into a tapestry of life, death, and rebirth and consciousness that is so much bigger than the small self. From that place, our choices, the direction of our life, what we do with our time here in this body, our experience of it while it's happening, it transforms in ways that can't even really be articulated, right? Things become dynamic, and we become part of an evolutionary current that, is much, much bigger than the small self. And it doesn't require us to subscribe to a particular ideology or anything. It's a felt experience. And being rewoven back in is probably the underlying medicine to many of the problems that people are looking to solve. Be they health problems, economic problems, philosophical problems, whatever. That's kind of the place that I believe it can take us. And plants can do it, planets can do it, working with the body can help do it. And for me, I think if people go back and listen to the podcast that we did in season 1, I talk about the way that the rose and Venus, I was initiated at the same time by both of them without realizing what a deep connection they had. It was a reweaving. It was me being rewoven back into the fabric of life after feeling split off from it.
I love the way that you language this. Yeah, this reorientation, this retuning our senses, retuning ourselves through this larger body of work to become more rewoven into this evolutionary, universal flow of life. This evolutionary tapestry.
So why would I worry? Once that's happened? Why would I be violent? Why would I spend my whole life trying to escape death that's inevitable anyway and cause a whole lot of destruction and suffering on the way? Why would I be a slave to predatory systems that want me to be, reduced down to being a consumer? Or why would I feel like I was trapped and limited by political systems when I live in a first world country and all of my basic survival needs are actually met? Freedom, it's an inside job, ultimately. I don't want to disregard the very real consequences and situations that some people are in who have been, really terribly persecuted, and the trauma that causes and the way it makes it hard to change. I get it. I really do. But I'm talking macro level. Do we want to be liberated? Do we want to be awakened? What does that really mean? Well, it's not going to be conditional on what everything outside of me does, And all of that everything outside of me, which is constantly being co-created by every individual one of us, is only ever going to be a reflection of that experience that we're all having. So this is the Pluto work. Like, this is why Pluto is what we're talking about. This is why it's important. Because when we do the Pluto work, we do the shadow work, we face our demons, we become less scared of the unknown, we digest the trauma, we liberate our energy, we come back into deep relationship with the whole weave of life, then we have the creative resources and energy to create and to change and to, birth our visions from this deeper place. And with so much change on the planet at this time, there's entirely an opportunity for that to happen. But which way it goes is going to be very dependent on how willing every single individual person is to do the Pluto work.
Yeah, this
basically.
is touches upon perhaps one of the great philosophical discussions, and I don't know if it's the time or place to get into it here, but it's really this intersection between destiny, karma, free will, intentional direction, prayer. Yeah, when we're, at least when I'm thinking about zooming out and taking in the larger arc of life, of this universal blueprint, I often talk about these stepping stones of, well, one is starting at hope. You hope things are going to be better, or you're hoping for this, but what's on the other side of hope? Well, I don't know the direct correlation, but it's probably something to do with despair, right? And then the next stepping stone can be trust. We often hear like a trusting. I trust in the universe. I trust in Great Spirit to provide. But on the other side of trust, I say there can be a mistrust or a distrust. So it's not quite the full stepping stone. And then the stepping stone again from trust is a knowing. It's a gnosis. You don't need to trust anymore because you know. You know in the greater scheme, you know that change. You know that life and death are an inherent part of life, and you can know that, okay, that's part of life, and if I can rest in this greater flow and, like you say, be rewoven into this larger evolutionary tapestry, well, surely that can only be a good thing for us.
Then you're empowered. You're empowered, and at that point, you know, yeah, I love that. I love that, and that's why I can't tell anyone to believe in astrology. I can just say, if you have a bit of a yearning or a curiosity, go and look up, feel it, dip your toe in the water and see if that could be one of your doorways
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah, well, how do you feel about touching upon your heart alchemy program? Of course you would love to.
Yeah, great. I'm going to grab a
Cool.
blankie and throw it around my shoulders because having just come from the Amazon into deep
Okay, you're still
winter.
acclimating to the New Zealand weather.
Yeah,
Hey, and just
well
to
and
touch upon
truly.
that, this to kind of round out the embodied astrology talk before we get into hard alchemy program, I love the way that you talk about or use these phrases, these terms of composting, mutation, digestion. And one thing that you offered in your email as well, which I'm kind of cycling back to in regards to Pluto retrograde of entering Capricorn again. I love this idea of like the embodied sense of it, and also the mythic sense of it is the healthy sense of it, perhaps, is not, or rather refertilizing, composting, digesting, mutating what has been, those old structures, the patterns, the programs, whatever has been, that, to use the cliche wording, what is no longer serving, but it's totally serving. It's totally serving us in a way, yeah. But
Yeah,
I like the language around that.
100%. And knowing that just because something has outgrown its current evolutionary relevance, it doesn't mean that it was bad. Like yeah, refertilizing. It's interesting because I've got so much Capricorn in my chart, my life since 2008, like whoa, and especially since 2020. And it's been hard. But what is left at the end of that process that remains has been purified and strengthened. And it creates this indestructible foundation of totally authentic, yeah, medicine that we then carry forwards with us.
Cool. Heart alchemy. 40 days and nights of sadhana with Venus and Leo. You touched about it a little bit, but first of all, can you explain what sadhana is to the listeners and then get into the details of heart alchemy?
So a sadhana is a period of devotional work that is done where we commit to a practice for a set period of time or in a set way, and that's an offering that we give into whatever it is. In this case, it's Venus in Leo, and yeah, 40 days and 40 nights, very biblical, you know. But that's how long Venus is retrograde for. So basically, Venus she is coming as close to the Earth as she ever gets. And she will be in between the Earth and the Sun. She's an evening star. She's dropping, dropping, dropping. She will then disappear from sight, pass between the Earth and the Sun, being alchemized. Imagine that energetic, if you can feel it inside your body, the radiance of the sun at the core of your being. And then your physical body being the Earth. And then Venus passing directly between your inner vitality and your physical body, and infusing it with her particular eros, desire, beauty, relationships, all that you love and value, getting reattuned between your physical body and the core vitality of yourself. It's lovely to just experience it in a moment like this. But what about doing it when that's actually what's happening in the sky? In that way, the prayers get very, very loud. The prayers get very loud. The work that happens becomes that much more amplified. So that's why this is timed in such a way.
It sounds epic.
It is. It's going to be epic. It's going to be epic. And that 40 days and 40 nights, that was Moses. Jesus in the desert. Was it Jesus or Moses? Someone went into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights.
I'm sure there's been a few people that have gone into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights.
Exactly. And that number occurs in a few different traditions as well.
Totally does.
The cycle of Venus, because it's so easily visible, it is really layered with mythology. And every 8 years, Venus will come and do one of these retrogrades in the same sign that she did 8 years ago. So it's like an 8-year revisiting. So 8 years ago, there was a Venus retrograde in Leo. Now we're having another one. People may notice that themes or people or things from 8 years ago are reactivating now with this cycle. And just to circle back, what I was saying is that Venus was dropping from the evening sky, will pass between the sun and the earth, and then she'll be reborn as the morning star. Morning star Venus is a very different Venus than an evening star Venus. And this evolution of the feminine current through her 584-day cycle there's just so much richness and depth in there mythically across many different cultures. It's observable in the sky, but heart alchemy is really an opportunity to say one cycle is dissolving into this kind of time outside of time of the sun and the retrograde, where we have an opportunity to really, really work with our own desires, our own prayers, our own heart, because Venus in Leo is all about the heart. It is all about creativity, joy, what we love, how we creatively express authentically. What is our true authentic expression in this life? What are we creating? What are we giving birth to? Are we performing? Are we in some kind of narcissistic delusion? Or are we really anchored to our own true expression and all of the things that could be in the way of that happening? This is the stuff we'll be working on. Anywhere where people feel like they're too much or they're not enough, or they're having looping relationship patterns that they can't seem to get out of, or they're feeling creatively blocked and they don't know what they're here to do and here to give. They're feeling like they have issues allowing themselves to feel pleasure, because Leo has so much to do with pleasure, and pleasure is really the essential fuel that we need to actually handle doing the Pluto work. Without pleasure, we just run on an empty tank. We can't get through it. We just get stuck in the underworld. And so this 40 days and 40 nights there'll be 3 live calls, which are direct transmissions, their activations, their embodied astrology guided calls, and then everyone who's participating will have a daily practice that they do for the whole 40 days. And it might be 10 minutes. It doesn't have to take up a lot of time. But there'll be we'll have a Mighty Networks page, so there's community support. And then each week even though they're not live calls all the time, because I think we've all just been online too much, each week there'll be a ritual and a video and an update that'll be perfectly timed with the deeper subtleties of the transit, because there's astrological nuances the whole way through. I can attest that the prayers I laid down during the Venus retrograde of 2020, December 2021, were like seeds that were planted that have grown through her whole cycle. And now, as that cycle's closing out, I am absolutely convinced of why this has been observed and ritually worked with for so many thousands of years, because it's totally come to pass, you know? So I'm super excited about it. Yeah, it's worth adding that the reason I think this is all so important is that Leo is opposite Aquarius. And because of Pluto and Aquarius and everything we've been talking about, doing this deep self-nourishing work with Venus and Leo is really positioning us to authentically relate to what's happening in the wider world, and with Pluto and Aquarius, so that we can be empowered creators, so we can be authentic, so we can move from a place of love rather than like fear and this mental distortion. Yeah.
Well, for those that are listening, for those that are watching, it is pretty evident that Lara knows her stuff, and she is do I dare say, a wisdom keeper, a wisdom revealer, a great mentor in this regard. So reach out to her, get in touch. When's it start, Lara?
It starts in Australia and New Zealand on the 23rd of July, 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. In many other parts of the world, it starts on July 22nd, which is actually the feast of Mary Magdalene. Beautiful synchronicity, being that Mary Magdalene is deeply connected with the Venusian mysteries, the old Venus cults that stretch all the way back to Egypt and even Sumeria. So there's a lot, you know, we could do a whole podcast just on the Venus retrograde. I did one the other day. But yeah, July 22nd, 23rd, depending where you are.
Okay, do you want to give a plug for that podcast episode you did the other day about that?
Yeah, so that was with Law of Positivism, a beautiful girl called Trine out in Sweden. She has an Instagram account, and also I've reposted it on my Instagram, which is mythic_muse. So if people want to really understand more about the Venus and Leo retrograde, that's a good listen.
All right, and then is Instagram the best place, or should they go to your website for all those who are interested in hard alchemy?
Yeah. pathoftherose.com is my website, and heart alchemy registrations can happen through there. I've got payment plans available for people too. I also accept Bitcoin, and if somebody really wants to join and it feels financially like too much of a reach or a stretch, I'm open to people reaching out to me as well, because accessibility is important.
All right, it's getting to about that time where we will wrap things up. It felt like that flew by.
Such a chat. Yeah, great.
All right, is there anything that we haven't touched upon that you think is relevant to share or discuss before we finish up?
I think if people are curious and they don't know where to start, find your birth time if you can. If you don't know your birth time, there are actually astrologers that do something called chart rectification, and they can even help you figure out what your rising sign may be. And, there's lots of cool astrologers that do how to read your chart, or like intro to astrology courses, and one planet at a time, one sign at a time, one moon cycle at a time. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. There can be so much juice that comes from just connecting with one of these planetary frequencies. So yeah, I just encourage people to follow their curiosity,
And if it's not
and not to worry. Don't freak
Worry,
out.
don't
Like,
fret, don't freak out.
it doesn't serve anything. Or
If
worry
you want.
and then deal with the worrying and keep going.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if it isn't already evident to those that are tuning in, it's not just a heart alchemy that you're offering. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're also doing personal readings, right?
Yeah, my book's kind of open and closed depending on where I am,
Okay.
but my books will be open through July
Mm-hmm.
and August, and then they'll close for a little while. So people on my website can just book directly. Yeah.
Okay, right. So connection with you, it's via your Instagram and website. They're the best contacts. So mythic_muse and pathoftherose.com, right?
That's the one.
Okay, no worries. Alrighty. Well, let's rein it in there then. Big thank you to you, Lara, for offering up some space time to have this convo. And like I said, people, if you are listening or watching and you've received something valuable from this convo, drop in. Let us know. Hit Lara up. Show her plenty of love. And who knows, maybe we can do another episode at some stage in the near or distant future, Lara, and I'll organize a reading with you, and maybe we can go through that for an episode on this podcast and really put myself in the limelight then. But it might give people an idea of like what a reading's actually like.
Well, that's very brave of a Scorpio heavy person to be so open to being revealed publicly.
Well, maybe after you saying that, maybe I'll reconsider that idea. You've dropped a seed of doubt in my mind.
No, yeah, that'd be cool. I'd love to read your chart and yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk.
Okay.
All right, well, connecting with me on the personal front, you can connect in a few places. The website is Aotearoa.com. You can come and subscribe on YouTube. Search Birdsong with Cayuta. You can search my handle on Instagram, which is at Cayuta Kiora. And I've been doing a little bit of cross-posting of video reels onto TikTok as well. So if that's your thing, you can head over there. And big thanks, everyone, for tuning in. May your steps be light. May your heart be open. May your spirit be free. And may we all find more moments to remember, to pause, to breathe, to connect with self, with stillness, with nature, and to tune into the magic and mystery of this wild, mythic tapestry of which we're all a part. We hope this episode was as fruitful as birdsong or morning wind. Until next time, thanks, Lara.
Thank you.